Hello, everybody. This is Lynn Pierre with Homeschool Aficionado. Today, you are going to hear me have a conversation with my main man, Matt. Now, Matt, he's a great guy. I've known him for a few years in ministry, and he just has a really good heart. So, and you're going to see that throughout the interview because I don't know everywhere this interview is going to go, but I know what I'm going to ask him. And I know that his heart is going to come through with each and every question that I ask him. He is really excited about family, about his faith, and he's excited about what he does. So this is the only guy that I have talked to or been in a relationship with that does what he does. I'm not even going to tell you what he does. I'm going to let him tell you what he does. But I think it's so cool. And this is the reason why I want to interview him. Yeah, we're friends and everything. He's a man of God. But I want you all to be exposed to people that are in various careers that make things happen that we enjoy experiencing, but we have no idea who's behind the scenes doing these special and cool things. So sit back and relax. This is my main man, Matt. We are going to have a great time, I'm sure, and I'll see you after the interview.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Matt. Like I told you, Matt, what's going on, buddy?
It's good to be here, man. Always a fun time to talk to you, man.
Well, yeah, you are the man. So today, I just really want to dive into who you are and what you do for a living. And just to give some context to everybody, I'm not sure how long I've known you, but you have really been instrumental in mine and my wife's life, in our marriage, because you are someone that, of course, you're married, you're a father, you're part of the ministry we're a part of, but you have actually demonstrated, you know, by phone, by text, in person, the man of God that you are.
Oh, man.
And I wanted to have you on here simply because one of these other guys, this is interesting. Another gentleman that I spoke to, he was talking about how he hires people. And the number one thing that he looks for when he hires people is their character, because he can teach them how to do a certain task, but teaching someone how to have good character is a totally different story. So just meeting you and your family and spending the time with you that I have, you are a man of good character. So that's definitely something that I wanted my homeschool community and the homeschool communities around the world to get a taste of. So give us a little introduction of who you are and what you do for a living and all that.
All right. Well, I think the same thing about you guys because you and Dewana are our small group leaders, and you've just been so awesome, and we just really enjoy our group. So right back at you on the character thing.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah, my current role is Chief Innovation Officer at Storyland Studios and our sister studio that we call Plain Joe Studios. And essentially, Storyland and Plain Joe do the same thing, but just for two different audiences. And we're an experience design firm. So we create experiences, and we create experiences based on story because we as human beings are all wired to be moved by story. It's just in our DNA to be impacted by story. And so we think of story in three dimensions of strategic, interactive, and spatial storytelling. The strategic storytelling is the story that walks away with you. It's the feeling you get in your heart when you think about your favorite brands, whether you're a Disney fan or maybe Apple or Nike or your church, what have you. And then the interactive storytelling is the story you engage with. A lot of people think of it as online experiences like a website or social media, and that's certainly a part of it, but it's also any interaction that you have with the brand, like the culture, the people. So we consult on those things as well. And then spatial storytelling is the story you walk into, the actual spaces. So we have a team of architects, master planners, interior designers, attraction designers for our theme park and attractions clients that we work with. But essentially, we're looking to create a connected story across those three dimensions of strategic, interactive, and spatial storytelling.
Wow. So how did you get into this?
Yeah, I came in through more of the strategic and digital doors, I guess, and then got into spatial. So when I was in college, I studied advertising, and I picked advertising because I always liked science as a kid and was very analytical, but I also had a creative side. I like to write. I like to think of ideas. And so advertising just seemed like an area that had both of those things. And so I majored in that. I got an internship in that with an ad agency, and then got hired by them right after school. And it was a small, little agency down in Central Florida where I grew up in the Orlando area that worked on.
Florida.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hey, remind me again, what school did you go to down in Florida?
I went to Florida State University, because
Yeah,
it's
man.
Tallahassee at FAMU, but yeah, I was a Florida State Seminole. Had an opportunity to
Yes.
play football when I was there, which was a great experience for sure.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I know. I just want to bring that up because, you and I have ties to Florida, so I just want to bring that up real
Yeah,
quick.
man.
That's all.
Yeah. So
So
I got a
go
job,
ahead.
a little agency that worked with like, the local hospital, the local bank, that kind of thing. And, and great group of people, got to learn a ton at a very young age because it was small.
Wait,
And
hold on a second. So
yeah,
when you were working for the advertising agency back then, well, social media wasn't big and booming like it was right now. So, like, what actually were you doing then? Like, what were your skills and what were your strategies back then as far as advertising?
yeah. I mean, back in those days, we had cable TV, radio, newspapers and print were a lot more prominent. Obviously, billboards were still a thing. Um, and then, we also had PR, public relations, which is the ability for a company to get basically free publicity from the media. So we work on that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, definitely the internet wasn't much of a factor yet. When I was going to school, the internet existed and they were starting to talk about interactive, and actually FSU had the first graduate program in interactive. So I learned a lot about that, but it wasn't really implemented until, the mid to late 90s is when it started picking up and becoming more of a factor. So it was more of those traditional media of print, TV, radio, etc. And so then,
So you personally were like learning how to write ads and put ads on billboards, and then you will find out what, like I mean, because like online right now, we can test stuff quickly.
yeah.
We put up a post and we can look online and say, oh, 1,000 people liked it, so that's okay or that's bad or whatever. But you were just putting things in magazines and newspaper and on billboards. And how would you get feedback from that? How would you know that it was working?
Well, we used to have a saying that 50% of our advertising is working. We just don't know which 50%.
Okay.
But we would do the techniques like maybe tying in a certain 800 phone number to it, or
Mm.
soon as websites started becoming more common, you could do a slash whatever in order to track those responses. But even today, if you think about it, a feeling people get about a brand and liking a brand in the first place, it can be measured to some degree online, but maybe that last click got you to go to those Nikes and purchase those Nikes, and they can measure that and they can see where that came from. It came from this Instagram ad, but you don't know all the other impressions out there that led to that. The fact that their favorite athlete has a Nike swoosh on his shirt and they sponsored this basketball tournament and all of the things that led to it. There's still that layer of branding that's really important, that if you didn't do all that stuff, that Instagram ad wouldn't be as effective because you'd be like, what is that shoe? I don't know
Wow.
what it is, right? So
That's so good.
yeah, so you have to be careful about what you think are the metrics that drove the actual purchase decision. Uh,
Mhm.
that just happened to be that last click that got them to do it. And then still, when you're in the grocery store and you buy a pack of Oreos, you don't know what exact ad or message led you to buy the Oreos. You just got these overall impressions, and then you felt like you were in the mood for Oreos. So there's still a lot of art to go with the science out there.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
I worked for that ad agency, but it was kind of small. I wanted to do something a little bigger. And so I ended up getting a job at an ad agency here in North Carolina called Price McNabb. I actually lived over in Asheville, but they had offices all over the Carolinas. And in that place, I really got experience in working on advertising for places and tourist destinations.
Oh,
Yeah, so I started working on Asheville tourism, getting people to come to the mountains and hang out in Asheville. And then Biltmore Estate, which is the biggest attraction in Asheville. I don't know. Have you ever been to Biltmore?
I've been to the campus, but I haven't been on the actual tour.
Oh, yeah.
So no, I haven't. Yes.
Yeah, so Biltmore is the largest home in America. It was built by the Vanderbilts, one of the wealthy families at the turn of the 19th to 20th century. And it's a beautiful place. It's 8,000 acres of grounds and gardens and shops and hotels. And so I got to work on that and really loved working on travel and tourism. And we were able to,
So
yeah, go ahead.
let me stop right there. So Biltmore. So when you say you worked on Biltmore, so you worked on drawing attention to what Biltmore has, or were you crafting the story? Like, are you into storytelling yet, or are you getting more attention for Biltmore? So you more of an advertising, or are you doing a story thing, or both? What are you doing for Biltmore?
Well, it's all story. So,
Okay.
we were telling the story of Biltmore to get people to want to come there. And the challenge with Biltmore is that people kind of know it's a big house, and it's like,
Yeah.
why do I want to go see some big house, right? And so our strategy was to help people understand that this is more than a big house. This is, if you've never been before, it's the largest home in America. It's like one of those national landmarks that you need to see. It's 255 rooms. It's 4 acres of floor space.
4 acres
Yeah, the house.
inside of a building.
Yeah, 4 acres. And and then they had all this technology that you didn't have normally in 1895, where they had an elevator and electricity throughout the house and central heat and all this crazy stuff. So we put it on people's radar. This is something you need to see. Then, okay, this is kind of a lesson in what we call segmentation. It's like different audiences need to hear different things from a product in order to understand why they should experience it. So if you've been to Biltmore, you may have kind of checked that off the list. But we wanted to talk to repeat visitors in a different way to help them understand that Biltmore is different in every season. There's Festival of Fun,
Mm.
spring. You got to see in the fall when all the leaves are out. You got to go to Christmas at Biltmore, where there's like 50 Christmas trees in different parts of the house and string quartets playing and choirs singing and, special dinners. And so we created these reasons for people to come back as well. And then, so you've got those separate messages for each audience, but then you also want to have what's called an umbrella positioning. What's the overall story of the place? And we wanted to help people understand. I can still remember the way we set our brand positioning. It was Biltmore represents the vision of George Vanderbilt to do everything in the grandest, finest, most enduring way possible. So that was a big idea that made you understand what Biltmore was all about. And so now you see Biltmore exist in consumer products. You can go into Belk and you can buy, bedspreads and housewares under that Biltmore brand, because that overall brand has that bigger meaning of grandest, finest, most enduring. And so those are the kind of things that we do in storytelling, is to help people understand, when you're getting bombarded with all these messages, to make it crystal clear what this thing is all about, because the competition for somebody's dollar is stiff, and you got to create compelling reasons why somebody would want to go here versus go there.
Right. So, wow. Okay. You said a lot. So that whole biggest brand, little, I guess, phrase or whatever statement you said about a bit more, that's super cool. So you have that biggest brand idea that you can basically put out to anybody, and then you can put that on, you can use that to sell a restaurant or a t-shirt or anything that's associated with Biltmore.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so All right. So that's how, just for instance, that's how any company has all these different things that they sell. So they are the Biltmore house, but a Biltmore house can have a million different things associated with the Biltmore house that they can sell because it all fits under that big idea of what the Biltmore stands for.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
same
it's
goes
like,
for Disney.
yeah,
Working on Biltmore, and we had some success with that campaign, and for the stuff that we did for Asheville, that's what helped me get to Disney and on their marketing team. And so when I got to
okay, talk about it.
yeah, so when I got to Disney, Disney already had this Walt Disney World. I was based in Orlando, and that's already the most popular place to visit in the world. So a lot of people would joke, well, like, why do they need advertising? Why do they need you? But uh, Disney's a publicly traded company, and you got to grow every year in order to make the stockholders happy. So we were always thinking of ways to bring more people there. Uh, we had to grow every year. You had a good year, pat yourself on the back, but next year's got to be better, right?
Yeah.
So Disney already had this brand of the most magical place on earth, which it is. I think it is. But they had collected all of these sort of products underneath that big idea. So you had 4 theme parks: Epcot, Magic Kingdom, Animal Kingdom, which we launched while I was there, and Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Cool.
That's another story, launching Animal Kingdom. And then actually, I was brought in to work on a new experience, the ESPN Wide World of Sports. They hired me because they like my travel and tourism and sports background, being a college athlete. And
Yes.
and so we launched ESPN Wide World of Sports and got to be a part of that launch team. But we also worked on what we call the brand architecture for Walt Disney World. And that is, okay, yeah, we're the most magical place on earth, but what do all these things mean underneath it to tier up to that greater brand? And so I specifically worked on Walt Disney World resorts, and what does how does the resorts fit into the overall picture? And so we started to create these brand positionings for all of the components underneath. So the Magic Kingdom is about fantasy. The Epcot is about discovery. Animal Kingdom is the imagination of Disney gone wild. Disney's Hollywood Studios is about show business, and then the positioning that we developed for the resorts is about uh, stay in the magic throughout your entire vacation. You don't have to leave the bubble, the Disney bubble, and fight I-4 and all that, and to go back to your hotel and leave the magic and then have to come back into it the next day. You can stay in a beautifully themed Disney resort that continues your magical experience. You have the magical cast members that are trained in the Disney way. So that was kind of our contribution to the overall brand architecture of Walt Disney World. So you got that, that big idea, like grandest finest for Biltmore, or the most magical place on earth for Disney. But then underneath that, you got to figure out how to all those products work underneath that. And then
Yes.
there may be different messages to different audiences. So another thing we thought through for Disney was our segmentation for first time visitors versus repeat visitors. It's kind of like we did for Biltmore. So
Wow.
yeah, so first time visitors, obviously there's a lot of people that we called intenders. Oh, I intend to go to Disney someday. Yeah, that's on the list. That's on the bucket list. We'll get there. But then they just sort of continued to put it off. And so we would, come up with reasons why this is the year to visit. So we might talk about an anniversary of Disney, and we'd have all kinds of celebrations around that anniversary. Or I was there in 99 to 2000 when we celebrated the millennium. So we positioned Disney as the place that you need to be to celebrate the turn of the millennium. Or now we would launch a new theme park like Animal Kingdom, or a new ride like Rock and Roller Coaster, to give those intenders a reason that this is the year that you need to come. And then repeaters are folks that we want to come back, and some of those same messages would be ones that would lure people back. It's like, hey, now we have Avatar at Animal Kingdom. You really got to come. So you're always having to think of that next reason to get the first timers to finally get off the couch and come. and then repeaters to be able to come back and spend their next vacation with us. It was a constant battle, but just being there at Disney at such a young age, they probably gave me way more responsibility than I should have had at that age. But it was like a grad school experience launching ESPN Wide World of Sports, Animal Kingdom Park, and then we launched a ton of new resorts and being a part of that brand architecture project. It was just a period of time that could never be replicated that I feel really blessed to have been a part of.
Let me ask you a question because you were just talking about you in Asheville. So did you move from Asheville down to Orlando during this time?
Yes.
Okay.
I grew up in the Orlando area. So I thought this is I'm probably going to be a Disney lifer. I mean, what could get better than working for Disney? And my parents live here. My wife Lori's parents live down there. And so I probably thought I was going to be a lifer. But then I got a call from that same agency that I had left with an opportunity to come back and be a part of the leadership of the company. But that's another story. I don't know if you wanted to drill in on any of the Disney stuff before we move on from Disney.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do. Okay. Yeah. 'Cause I'm here taking notes, man. You know I love master class, and you are giving me a master class, buddy. So what I want to go back to also, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take us a little bit behind the scenes as far as this Disney thing is concerned. The first thing I want to talk about is you talked about the intenders and the repeaters. So are you telling me that you and your team are like sitting in the office and like crafting stuff about, hey, someone that intends to go to Disney, what are they thinking? What can we say to them to get them to come like this year, like in 2025? This is what we need to say to them to get them to come this year. And the same thing with the repeaters. And so, like every year, y'all are having a new conversation about what campaigns you are going to run this year for those two different groups of people. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. And
Wow.
yeah, so there's a whole strategy behind the creativity. I'm losing my voice. There's pollen. There's a whole strategy behind the creativity that you see. So this year, the competition is stiff for Disney. Universal Studios in Orlando is opening Epic Universe, which is a brand new theme park that is going to be awesome. Actually, some of my teammates at Storyland have worked on it, and it's going to be amazing. They're going to have Super Nintendo World. They're going to have How to Train Your Dragon Land. They're going to have a Dark Universe, which is all the classic Universal Studios monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula. There's going to be, of course, another Harry Potter land. And so if I'm at Disney right now, I'm going, all right, how do, while this brand new park is coming from Universal, so I'll
Right.
probably be trying to capitalize on some of that traffic that's going to be coming down to Orlando to say, hey, while you're down there, you wouldn't say this directly, but you're just giving people a reason to, hey, why don't you go ahead and stay at Disney resorts because they're better. And, why don't you go ahead and lock into 4 days of Disney parks and go see that, one new Universal park. So there are ways that Disney can actually capitalize on that increase in attendance that inevitably is going to be happening with Universal.
Right. Because anytime something new, opens up in Orlando, everybody wants to rush down there, of
Yeah,
course.
that's right.
Okay, so now before we move on to Storyland, I want to talk about these launches because you were talking about Animal Kingdom and ESPN launch. So let's stay on Animal Kingdom because I love animals, but my bucket list thing is still going on an African safari. So in Animal Kingdom, tell me about like okay, why did you all decide to launch it and what was the process of launching? How do y'all come up with an idea that it would be great if we had an animal kingdom? Take me through the whole birthday and launching and all that stuff.
Yeah. Have you been to Animal Kingdom Park yet?
Good question.
You would have remembered it.
Because I'm thinking so much, I probably haven't.
Yeah.
Because what's the tagline?
The imagination of Disney gone wild.
The imagination of Disney going wild, yes. So I don't think I have. I mean, I've been down to Disney a million times, but no, I have not been to Animal Kingdom. So
Yes.
tell me about it.
Well, first of all, if it's your dream to go on a safari, they have a safari at Animal Kingdom, and it is the closest thing you can get to a real African safari. Like you're in a truck and there are animals just running around with no visible barriers between you and the animals. Elephants,
I had no idea.
lions, I mean, cheetahs, all of it,
In Orlando,
in Orlando. And
right up the
they have,
street.
they have crafted the landscape to look like you're on the African savannah. So it's pretty awesome. It's
Okay.
yeah. So
I'm sold.
yeah, so that might be your first step before going on the actual African safari, which would be unbeatable. But no, the way that Animal Kingdom originated was the CEO at the time, Michael Eisner. He was a million creative ideas. He was an idea a minute kind of guy, and he basically said we should do something with animals. People love animals.
Mm-hmm.
So he sort of handed that idea to the Imagineering team. So Walt Disney Imagineering is the group that thinks up the ideas. It's a group that was created by Walt Disney himself when he built the first Disneyland, designed the first Disneyland in California, which opened in 1955. And at the time, it was actually a separate company called WED, W-E-D, which stood for Walter Elias Disney, WED Enterprises. And
Okay.
yeah, and eventually he started calling these guys Imagineers because the Imagineering team is a group of more than 100 different disciplines. So you've got architects, engineers, artists, art directors from the film industry that create sets, writers, all of these people coming together to do these creative things. So Michael Eisner says, got to do something with animals, figure it out. And so
Really, and you're being completely honest. He like comes up with an idea and then drops it on this Imagineering team and said, "Y'all come up with something."
yeah, that's how this happened.
Okay.
Sometimes new products happen for different reasons. Maybe there's some research that says we need this or that, but this was just strictly a creative idea from the CEO that we should do something with animals. People love animals. And so the Imagineering team led by a guy named Joe Rohde, uh, just began to brainstorm and think about what this could be. And where they landed was we want to create a park that's about animals, real animals, imaginary animals, prehistoric animals, all of it. And so from the very beginning, they began to map it out and they thought, well, we got to have Africa. Africa's got amazing animals. Asia. Then they created a Dino Land, which is all about dinosaurs. And then there's like a central part of the park that has the Tree of Life. And then there's an area called Conservation Station, where you actually take a train over there. You learn about animal conservation, and there's a petting zoo there. There was no Avatar Land yet. There is now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Dino Land is getting converted into the tropical Americas, and they're going to be putting in a whole section about Encanto, the really popular
Yeah.
movie, and Indiana Jones. There'll be an Indiana Jones ride. So the parks are always morphing, but at the time, that's what we had. And so they just came up with this incredible idea, and they're like, we're going to have places that you're walking through or riding through where it feels like there are no barriers between you and the animal. So I remember being in on one of these early presentations about what Animal Kingdom would be. And our biggest fear was that people would think, oh, Disney's building a zoo. I don't really, I've seen a zoo. I don't really need to go to another zoo. So that's where we thought, well, how do we get people to understand in this society where people are being hammered by messages? How do we send a crystal clear message that this is a full Disney theme park that also has, you know, real live animals in it, as well as imaginary and prehistoric animals. And so that's where we landed on this brand positioning of the imagination of Disney gone wild. A whole new species of theme park was another line that we used. We actually had a commercial that the team did where these two dads were talking and they're all dressed up in safari clothing, and they're talking about this African word, not a zoo. It's not a zoo. and they explained all the things that Disney was. So we had fun with that idea, and now it's one of the most visited places in the world. It's the most visited zoological park in the world. And
And
we
it all started with just an
uh,
idea.
we launched on Earth Day of 1998, and we had about 650 media on property, including all 4 TV morning shows. Al Roker was out there doing the weather. But this is like when we opened something new at Disney, it was a big deal, and it was fun to be a part of.
Wow. So you're telling me CEO comes up with an idea, pass it over to the Imagineering team, and they just sit around and just create something.
Mm-hmm.
They just create something, and then they come back and give a presentation to like the whole leadership Disney team, and then that they say yes, do it, no, don't do it. And then, let me ask you this: so he comes up with this idea, so he already knows, of course, that you all have property that y'all can put this stuff on. So Disney, like right now, for example, Disney has property that's not developed that they can put another theme park on if they wanted to.
Yes, absolutely, and that comes from Walt Disney's foresight way back when. So when they bought the property for Disneyland, um, they built that park, and then as the park became popular, people bought up the land all around the park, and they opened up, hotels, some of which were not that great, not really up to Disney standards. You got the little tacky T-shirt shops and all that stuff that cropped up, and they quickly realized, oh man, we're kind of landlocked. We're limited in our ability to expand. And so when they decided to open up a second destination, Walt was like, we're going to get enough land that we will never run out of room to do what we need to do. And so he actually hired a former World War II spy. So this was in like the mid 60s when he started thinking about this. Walt Disney World opened in 1971. I hired a World War II spy to secretly buy up property in the area, connected parcels of property. And so they set up a bunch of different companies under different names because, as soon as somebody gets word that Disney's buying property, then they start driving up the prices, gouging on prices of the land. And so
Right.
they created all these little separate companies that bought up all this land. And by the time people realized, oh, somebody big is buying up land, then it was too late. And they had accumulated 43 square miles. So that's how big Disney World is, 43 square miles. It's about 2.5 times the size of the island of Manhattan. It's as large as the city limits of San Francisco. That's what Disney owns. And so yeah, so even today, Disney is using, uh, I think, maybe 50% of its usable land, not even
Are you kidding me?
even counting what they have to set aside for wetlands and nature areas. So they have plenty of room to build more.
That is crazy that he had that type of vision way back then, and it still hasn't maximized the space today.
Yeah.
Like even today, his vision would be greater than anything that we can even imagine. That is wild.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Wow. So when the CEO comes in and says, "Hey, let's create another park," they're like, "Okay, whatever. I mean, we got plenty of room to do whatever you want to do."
Yeah. Yeah. And Animal Kingdom has the largest footprint of all 4 of the parks, especially with the, safari that you're driving through with all of these acres. It's a massive park, and it's a beautiful park. It's very natural. They did an amazing job with it. So, and I should clarify that before, when we're designing experiences like this, or when Imagineering designs experiences, before they start drawing up pictures of things and just thinking of random ideas, it's really important to start with the story first. Uh, yeah. So we have this phrase we use at Storyland that says, words create worlds. So you want to get the words on paper first as to what this thing is going to be. And so, they developed this clear vision that this park is going to be all about animals, and it's, prehistoric, real, and imaginary. So they got that really crystal clear story before they started designing anything. And then, once you have the driving story for the spatial thing that you're designing, there is a kind of a separate strategic story for marketing that would help people grasp it. And then that's what we did. We took that and then created that even more concise marketing story to help people understand this is the imagination of Disney gone wild. So it all
I love that.
works together.
Okay, so you're starting with the story before you even talk about the actual creation of the thing. The first step in creating something is what's the story.
Yes. Yeah. And that's
Wow.
because of that wiring of the human brain that we are wired to be moved, motivated by story. And so that's why it works. So there is a lesson, I think, in anything that somebody does, whether you're a scientist and you're trying to communicate a message of the research you're doing, or you're a business person trying to get an idea across. You got to boil it down to that concise story, and you got to take people on a journey, and the journey needs to have a little story arc to it. So if you think about some of the most popular stories of all time, I mean, the Bible is one, you know, connected story across 66 books written by multiple different authors, but it's cohesive and it's got ebbs and flows and it's got kind of a hero's journey to it. But
Hmm.
favorite movies, if you like Star Wars, if you like Marvel, if you like Lord of the Rings, whatever these, most popular franchise movies of all time, they have a story that they take people on where there's a little bit of a formula to it, a kind of a hero's journey where there's a little bit of a setup in the beginning of the situation, and there's an identification of a problem that needs to be solved. And then somebody comes in and they've got a vision for how to solve that problem, and then provide a solution for solving that problem, and then the resolution, and then kind of wrap it all up at the end. That's a formula that works. So if you're giving a presentation, if you're giving a sermon, if you're giving a school lesson, it's going to be more remembered if it's done with that kind of classic human story structure that will it'll cause people to retain that message. It'll cause people to be moved by that message.
Sweet. You are going off, man. I love it. So really anything that we're dealing with as far as the human interaction is concerned, I like how you tied in teaching because of course we teach in this homeschool community, we teach all the time. So anything that I want to teach my kids or my class and students, if I can wrap that in the story, then it's going to hit home a lot better and it'll be retained a lot better.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that as a society, I don't think teachers teach like that normally. What we normally do is teach principles and facts and figures and the details of, for example, the human body. But if I came up with the story that talks about how the blood travels from the heart all over the body, then okay, then the kids not only get it better, but they'll retain it better. So I'm gonna steal that idea and I'm
Yeah.
gonna use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
We're all guilty of not doing the storytelling because we have modern tools like PowerPoint that have become a crutch to where we've
Yes.
got these bulleted slides and we're just linearly walking through them. There's a funny thing, a meme that I found on somewhere out there on the internet about Winston Churchill. He gave this famous speech about the importance of jumping into the war and fighting the Nazis. And he had this whole speech about we're going to meet them on the beaches and we're going to meet them on the this and the that. And it was this really motivating speech that he gave before Parliament that made them decide we're getting into this war. We're going to fight the Nazis. And somebody put it into a PowerPoint. And it's like, we're going to headline, we're going to meet them on the bullet beaches here, there, and it just like takes all the life out of this like speech that he gave. So
Yes.
PowerPoint's a great tool, but it's like if you're giving a presentation, just use it to maybe put in a visual for something that emphasizes what you're talking about, but don't make people read what you're saying, you know,
Yes.
just use it as a visual aid and nothing more, but make sure you're telling a story.
When you talk like that, I think about Steve Jobs and
Yes.
and Keynote with Apple. And when I started working with Keynote, and I went from PowerPoint to Keynote, Keynote's big thing was put images and pictures up and just tell the story of what you're talking about. And when you look at Steve and his presentations, he would have great big beautiful pictures of stuff, and then he would just talk and discuss the story behind wherever he's leading you to. And they didn't have a bunch of text and writing on it until the very end when they want to talk about all the little features and stuff. But like you said, they led with the story was the main thing to get you into it. Then at the tail end, they'll tell you, how fast the phone is going to be and all these little details and stuff. So that's big. So now let's go back to this animal kingdom thing. So now the Imagineers had given a presentation of what it is. So, like, what's the steps between that time and okay, we're going to break ground and start building? And so, what's the next stages?
Yeah. So once you have the big idea story, then you begin to illustrate what that story could look and feel like with kind of conceptual artwork and some of the stuff that I have on my wall over here for experiences we're working on. And to get there, they actually hit the road and traveled. So they went to Africa, they went to Asia, they took a gazillion pictures, they bought stuff in the marketplace and sent it back. And, they began to work out what each of these lands would be. And so as you're designing a place, you start out with your conceptual renderings, and then you get that approved, and then you get tighter and tighter and tighter, and you start to go into the stages of architecture, which are schematic design, design development, and final construction drawings. So they go through all those processes. And then when you're creating an experience like a theme park, there's not just architecture, but there's media, there's ride engineering that happens. It's a huge team of people that are needed to bring that together. And then there's let's make sure people come and see this. So that's where the marketing
Yeah.
team came in. And we're like, wow, this is a lot for people to process. We don't want them to just think it's a zoo. So what are we going
Hmm.
to do to make sure that they get that this is a real Disney theme park that's about animals? And so then we got to working on what the parts that we were responsible for, the advertising, the PR, the promotion, to make sure that people came there. And then we had a great opening day, and ever since.
Wow. Okay. So, just in general terms, from the time that you all know that, hey, this is something that we're working on, to the time that it's actually done and someone can show up opening day, what's the time frame in that? Is that like a year or is that like 5 years? What's the time frame from idea to actually let's get on a ride?
Yeah, it depends on what you're designing. I was trying to remember the time span for Animal Kingdom was it's probably 5 to 7 years from that early, let's do something with animals to opening day. Disneyland, the original Disneyland that Walt Disney came up with, it was germinating in his head for a while. And then what's interesting about that is the process became very accelerated. He kept talking about it in the studio, and they were only an animation studio, starting to do maybe a little
Right.
of action. But anyway, he had this idea, and finally his brother Roy, who was the money guy in the organization, said, "Walt, I am meeting with ABC and Bank of America in New York on Monday, and you got to give me something to show them because maybe I could get them to fund this thing. Otherwise, you need to stop talking about this in the studio. It's a distraction." So Walt decided, all right, I'm going to crash and burn and give him something to bring. So he called up a favorite artist of his from the movie business, a guy named
Hmm.
Ryman. And he said, "Hey, Herb, I'm going to be designing a theme park about kind of a Disney theme park, and it's going to be awesome." And he started talking about it, and Herb was like, "Great, I would love to see it." And he's like, "Well, no, you're going to draw it." And he's like, "I'm going to draw it. Yeah, yeah. Can you come over?" And it's like a Saturday morning, and so he finally convinces Herb to come over, and then Walt's just like downloading Herb on what Disneyland's going to be. And by the end of this lost weekend, they had this beautiful conceptual rendering. You can Google it, like Herb Ryman original Disneyland concept. It was a beautiful vision of what Disneyland would be that's pretty true to what it is today. Like, it's not exactly the layout, but it communicates the idea. And so they brought this to ABC and Bank of America, and they ended up funding it to the tune of $5 million. And by the time they got finished building it, had taken $15 million. So it took in 1950s, mid 1950s dollars. But they finally launched it. But by the time they broke ground, they built the original Disneyland in 1 year, which is a breakneck speed.
1 year.
Normally, for a normal theme park, it's at least a year to go through the design process and at least a year to build, more likely, a couple of years. And for something as massive as Animal Kingdom, that's more of a 4 or 5 year process.
Wow. Okay, you said some things I like. One of the things you keep on talking about team. So
Yes.
I want you to talk a little bit about how important a team is, because it's like even Walt, you're talking about Walt Disney, like this isn't just him. He's like pitching his idea to someone that's going to draw it. Then he's pitching this idea is being pitched to someone that's going to fund it. So talk to us a little bit about how important team is. And the reason why I bring this up is because in the school system, especially the education system, you know, we go inside and teach, and I'm teaching you, Matt, and I just want you to get the information by yourself and regurgitate the information on a piece of paper or in presentation form, but I don't want you collaborating with your other little classmates and stuff. This is all on you. So it's like through your school year, at least through the majority of your high school and grade school, I want you to learn some information, internalize it yourself, and repeat it in very different formats so I can grade it. But when you get into college and when you get in the real world, now I need you. If you're going to be successful, I need you to collaborate with different people with different strengths in order to build something that's great. If you want to stay small, then you can just stay by yourself and do whatever. But in order to build something great, you got to collaborate with the team. So, talk to us a little bit about how important a team is, because in general, young people at this level, especially in education, we don't teach kids enough about working with other people in order to go towards a common goal.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you're talking to me about stuff I did. I didn't do anything apart from a team. Like, I didn't come up with Animal Kingdom, or even the brand positioning for Animal Kingdom, or even the brand positioning I led for uh, Disney Resorts. I might have been up there at the flip chart and I might have written up the final thing, but there was a whole team around the table collaborating to arrive at what we arrived at. So, I haven't done anything by myself. And even Walt Disney, Walt Disney didn't do it by himself. He was a spark of creativity, but he knew that he had to have a team around him. Like, even, yeah, he came up with Mickey Mouse, drew the original Mickey Mouse, but pretty quickly he turned the animation of Mickey Mouse up over to an artist called Iworks. And, and, Walt actually did the voice for Mickey for a while. So Walt did a lot, but even he knew that he needed to have a team. And so, yeah, I think in the educational system, it's important, obviously, to evaluate individual skills when it comes to building blocks like math and grammar and stuff. But eventually, we need to create team activities so that people know how to work together as a team. And actually, things like sports and band and dance and those kinds of things, that where you have to work together with others,
Hmm.
are a great training ground. I mean, my football experience was so pivotal for learning lessons of how do you bring together a diverse group of people with different skill sets and work together in harmony toward a same goal. Yeah, I can't say enough about the lessons that I learned through just coming up through sports and being exposed. Our coach at Florida State was Bobby Bowden, who was one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Yes, yes.
Leadership lessons that I learned from him were unbelievable. Yeah, team is important.
Okay. The other thing that you talked about was things that were in Walt Disney's head. So talk to us for a second about and I don't know what time frame he had, but how important, because this is still related to team, how important is it to get things that are in your head out of your head in order for things to move? Because I know a lot of people, like even young people, they come up with ideas like all the time, but they keep them to themselves. They keep them in their heads. Talk to us about maybe a strategy or the importance of getting things that are in your head out. Because if Walt Disney never, got those things out of his head to his artist friends, then Disney would have been 20 years down the road, or would have never happened. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, ideas are a dime a dozen, everybody has, I got a great idea for a business or whatever, but it's the execute
Execution.
that makes the
Yeah.
difference. And if you're really going to execute, it's got to be more than just you. Like
Mm,
no matter how small the project is. Like my wife Lori and I are investors in a hotel over in the Smoky Mountains, and it's a property that her dad purchased, and we later decided to invest. So I was tasked with coming up with the brand and the design for the hotel, as you can imagine.
hmm
Yeah, you've been over to our mountain house, but I don't know. Did we take you by the hotel at all?
No.
Okay, so it's one of those classic motor lodges that was built in 1948 in the glory days of road trips after World War II, where people were going to visit the national parks, and it's right outside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on the North Carolina side, right down the hill from our house. And so my father-in-law buys this place, and he's thinking about, well, maybe I'll convert it into apartments for the locals. And you go on this property, and it's just this classic, like 1948 mid-century building on this beautiful piece of property with two streams coming together in the mountain setting. And I was like, Pop, you have to, this has to be a hotel. Give me 2 weeks and I'll have a concept to you for it. And so
hmm
uh, basically, the story that we developed for this property was a retro road trip. What would it have been like
mm
to be back there in 1948 going on a road trip? What would that place be like? And so we converted the hotel into its glory days. We actually brought on local artists to do like murals, and a guy carved a totem pole out of a tree, and we got an Indian teepee on the property, and just really cool kind of Instagrammable moments throughout. We, redid the architecture of the office area a little bit to make it look more retro mid-century, and just kind of like leaned into that theming and completely remodeled it. The rooms were scary looking the way they were before. We completely redid those, and they're beautiful. I thought of some of these ideas, and my wife Lori, who's a really good designer, contributed to some things. But then it took a whole village of people. Like one of our partners is really good at construction. He helped make it all happen. My father-in-law has a background in the hotel business, so he knows what works operationally. We've got another partner who's like an artist, and she was able to source these local artists to come onto the property and design things. We have a general manager couple there that runs it, because I don't want to run a hotel. So it just takes a whole village of people to make things work.
My goodness. So once again, you started with a story.
Yes.
And then once you had that story, then you just found the people that could bring that story to life.
Yeah. Yeah. And story is, once you land on that story, it makes so many of the design and business decisions easier. Like we haven't really gotten to Storyland or Plain Joe, which is our group that works with nonprofits and even churches. So we're working on these big projects around the world that are multi-billion dollars, and then we can help a church children's ministry create a cool space as well. And it's story that does that. So once we arrive at that story, even if you have a small budget, it actually helps you make those budget decisions, because you can say, all right, do we really need this countertop material? Does it advance the story or not? And it really helps you prioritize all of those design decisions and those financial decisions. So story is really important.
Now, when you just said that about prioritization, I thought about homeschool and family. And I'm like, hey, what's the story of our marriage? What's
Mhm.
the story of our family? What's the story of our homeschool unit? You know, have one, two, three, or four, or five kids. What's the story? And then once you have that story, then what are the priorities that make that story come to life? You know, is it important to is it important to go to Africa for a safari? Is that going to be in line with the story? Or can we just go to Orlando for African safari? You know, is it important to buy Nikes or buy whatever? You know, what actually is most beneficial to the story? So that's a phenomenal concept right there. So I do want to transition a little bit like away from Disney, and let's transition to Storyland right now, like what you're doing right now with the company right now. Tell me about how did that transition happen? Because I imagine you moved back up here to North Carolina.
Yes. So what got me back to North Carolina was that agency that I'd worked for before hired me back, and it was an opportunity. Like, I thought I was going to be a lifer, but they really called with an opportunity to be a part of the leadership of the company. I saw that opportunity, and I also missed living in North Carolina. Even though I'm a Floridian, I really loved the weather, the people,
Season.
the seasons, all that. You know, we didn't grow up with any snow or fall leaves and
No.
like that. So yeah, that was appealing as well. So moved back up to North Carolina and Charlotte, and have been here ever since. And became a partner in that advertising agency, and we developed a real specialty in places and tourism destinations. So we worked with the parent company that owns Carowinds and a bunch of other parks around the country. So we got to continue to work in theme parks. We work on resorts like Pinehurst and Grove Park Inn and Pebble Beach out in California. We worked on the I Love New York campaign, the famous tourism campaign. So
Yeah.
I continued in that space, but then we worked with all kinds of other brands, like from Bojangles to Ford to Fisher Price and Mattel. So, continued to be in that business and had a lot of fun. But along the way, some of the clients that I would work with, we would end up maybe doing a brand refresh, and that brand would come to us and say, well, how does the brand impact our spaces? And so we would get the opportunity to speak into the interior design of a restaurant or a restaurant chain, or
Hmm.
the interior design and architecture of a resort, because we help them refresh their brand message. Or we might create a pop-up experience or something at a trade show or mobile marketing vehicle. So I really enjoyed creating these physical experiences. And then I, had the opportunity to work on the hotel. And so along the way, I met these two brothers, Peter and Mel McGowan. I was at a Christian leadership conference, and Mel was one of the speakers, and he was talking about his background at Disney. He was at Disney in California, and he was more with the Imagineering team that worked on the expansion of the California property, where they were landlocked, but they took that big parking lot that they had, they created a parking structure, and then built on top of that a downtown Disney, a whole shopping, dining, entertainment district with a hotel called Disney's Grand Californian.
Yeah.
One of the founders of the company, Mel, worked on that project. And then they also created a new theme park called Disney's California Adventure. So we hit it off over our common, Disney experience. And he's a person of faith as well. And you know, the company's Storyland and Plain Joe had worked on actually our church's spaces. So they created the design for our church campuses based on Elevation Church's story. And so we knew a lot of common people because of that, and just kind of hit it off and became friends. And we would collaborate on some things. Like, I hired Storyland to build a mobile marketing vehicle for a client of ours that we came up with. And then when COVID hit, we all started to figure out, hey, we can work from anywhere. And these guys
Yeah.
out in California, uh, but they were doing a lot of business on the East Coast, and they started talking to me about, hey, what would it be like if you kind of came on board as our East Coast principal? And so in late 2020, we worked out the deal, and I left my partnership in that other company and then joined up with Storyland. And Plain Joe. So that's what got me here.
Okay, so explain to me Storyland and Plain Joe. Are these two totally different companies with two totally different stories, or they have the same story? Tell me what's the difference between the two?
Same story, different audiences.
Okay.
So our vision as a company for Plain Joe and Storyland is that we tell stories that lift the spirit. We create these story
Mm.
and experiences that lift the spirit. And we serve two audiences that have different needs. So Storyland Studios serves the sort of corporate world. We do a lot of work in theme parks, experiences, resorts, but then we'll also we got hired by a company that wanted to create the first franchise tattoo studio. And had an opportunity to design that. We got hired by a title and escrow company where you close on your house. And they said, what if we could create a Disney-like experience in that business? So we do get hired, but we're working on a children's hospital, designing that. And with our Plain Joe brand, we essentially figure out how to bring that same storytelling excellence to the nonprofit world. We can, using the power of story, we can actually maximize those smaller budgets because of what I was telling you before, that story is actually a great budgeting tool because it can help you make those trade-off decisions. And we just have a heart for those causes. And so we love working with churches and nonprofits to help them do their thing, get their message out there, create spaces. We also create digital experiences like websites and apps and augmented reality, virtual reality, stuff like that.
Wow. So it's sort of like depending on who wants what you're offering. So if I'm a nonprofit and I want your services, then I'm Plain Joe. If I'm a big time corporation, I want your services, then I'm Storyland.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's,
Sweet.
I talked about that connection between Disney Imagineering and the marketeers.
Hmm.
We're essentially a group of Disney Imagineers and marketeers for hire for that anybody can access, because you can't hire Disney to come
Right.
do your thing, do your brand or do your website or do your space that you're trying to design, but you can hire us former Disney guys and we can bring that storytelling magic to whatever you're working on.
Okay. So tell me about this. So I'm whoever I am. Come to y'all and say, hey, I want y'all to rebrand me or redesign me or whatever people come to say that they want your services. Like what's the steps that you take a company through in order to get them to the point where, okay, now I understand we rebranded and stuff. Like how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you do what you do?
You might be shocked by this, but we start with story.
Oh, yeah.
This is
Wild idea.
No, well, we actually have a workshop where no matter what we're working on, like somebody can just hire us to do their brand. Somebody could just hire us to do a digital experience like a website or an app, or somebody could just say, hey, I have this building. I want you to help me refresh it or remodel it, or I have this land and I want to create an experience. It all kind of starts with a story workshop, essentially. So, and we have this exercise that we bring people through that if you think about any good story that you love, it's a combination of character, setting, and plot. So the character includes the people that you're trying to reach. It includes maybe the staff and the organization and the founders, but we also think of the place or the entity or the brand as if it were a person that you could walk up and shake the hand of that person. And we think about those characteristics of that brand, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, and kind of work through all that. So that's character. Setting, it's really important to understand the kind of setting that you're creating. When our team worked on Elevation Church, we thought about the fact that we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. What does that look, feel, taste like? And then in the plot, there's a story narrative that we're taking people on. There might be a historical story that we want to incorporate. And it's at the intersection of that character, setting, and plot that you always find the big idea. So our workshop
Mm.
through those three story circles. And then once we land on that, then that can inform, what does the brand look like? What do we need our website to do? What does this space need to look like? And how does it need to function? So that's the start of our process.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and then we
So we
assemble the right disciplines. If we're designing a space, we'll have the interior designers, the master planners, the architects, or if we're doing a web experience, we've got digital developers and designers and user experience people. If it's branding and communication, we have artists and writers that can bring all that stuff to life. Or ideally, all three. I mean, the companies like Disney and Apple that you admire, Nike, are telling a connected story across those three
Mm.
dimensions of strategic, interactive, and spatial storytelling.
Right. So you're dealing with the company individual, but once again, y'all are sort of like the Imagineerings that bring everything together and detail everything and craft everything the way it's supposed to look. Then you all bring in writers and app developers and website people to provide whatever service needs to be provided. Like, are those people on your team also, or you just have connections across the industry?
Yeah, we have about 120 people on our staff, and
Oh, okay.
so we have a lot of those people on board. And then whatever we don't have, or if there's overflow that's needed, then we have a large group of vetted, we call it our creative collective, people that we've worked with that are contractors, specialists in various areas. Like, for example, ride engineering. Like, we don't have ride engineers on our team. If we come up with an idea for a roller coaster, we're theming it, we're creating the storyline for it. But when it comes to engineering the actual roller coaster, there are companies out there that are really good at that. Or if we come up with a ride that needs an animatronic, like these robotic people that you see on some rides, there are companies that do animatronics. So we don't have all that in house, but we do have the basics in house of writers and art directors for marketing and communications and branding, web developers and designers and user experience people. And we are a licensed architecture firm, master planners, interior designers. We have all those people in house.
Cool. Now, question like with Storyland and with Plain Joe, is there any project that you worked on that was like extremely special or sentimental to you personally? Anything that just pops into your mind?
Man, it's like pick
It's too
one of
many.
the kids. One that's really special, it's top of mind right now because it's under construction and due to open next year, is Bethany Children's Hospital in Oklahoma City.
Mm,
Bethany Children's Hospital is an amazing hospital that works with severely ill and kids with disabilities. A lot of them are in there long term. And so it's a great hospital, wonderful staff. But they came to us and they said, when somebody arrives at this hospital and they spend time at this hospital, we want the environment to be uplifting to the healing. And
mm,
some of these kids could never go to a Walt Disney World because they may be immobile, they have to be in the hospital bed, what have you. We want to create a Disney-like experience at the hospital. And so,
wow.
yeah, we began to help them with their story. The cool thing is that the hospital sits on historic Route 66, so if you've ever seen the Disney Cars movie, about Route
Yes.
66. And so we thought, well, that's cool. And then the more we thought about it, we created this story about this is a landmark of hope basically on your journey to healing. So,
Mm,
and Route 66 is famous for its landmarks. They have like a giant whale and a giant dinosaur statue and all these interesting landmarks along the way. And so we actually leaned into some of those landmarks as characters. And then we're creating a landmark of our own. This giant 4-story tall caterpillar anchors the corner of the new building at the hospital that we're building. And that caterpillar symbolizes the transformation you're going to go through when you come to this hospital for your treatment. And so you see,
wow.
yeah. And so his name is Cal the caterpillar, and Cal is short for kaleidoscope because he's this colorful, multicolored caterpillar. Then you walk in to the hospital and there's a beautiful, like 4-story tall butterfly chandelier symbolizing your transformation from caterpillar to butterfly. And then all through the hospital, each floor kind of symbolizes a different stretch of Route 66. So we've got beautiful murals along the wall, fun characters. We've got screens with like animated characters coming to life. We even created a children's book that will be sold in the shops of Cal the caterpillar and his transformation and how it's frightening, but it's going to be good, and just taking that story and infusing it into every corner of the hospital. And we even do a lot of culture work with organizations to where we took their leadership team down to Walt Disney World and we kind of walked through the uh, the experience, and we pointed out Disney's 5 keys of their culture, and how their employees, that they're called cast members, play out that culture every day. And actually, the reason Disney employees are called cast members is that it's the idea that we're putting on a show for our guests. And so, therefore, you are a cast member. You're playing a role. So even if you don't feel happy, you're going to smile. They really take that culture seriously. So that the way that employees behave is just as important as what the spaces look like. And so we took the Bethany team through that cultural exercise, and then we facilitated a workshop the next day to say, okay, if our story is Landmark of Hope, what is that? What are our landmarks of, behaviors and culture that we need to embody? And so we helped them come up with those landmarks and then consulted with them to implement that on their staff. So now we're creating this holistic experience all based on this big idea story.
Goodness, that is crazy. Let me tell you something. I was just talking the other day. I asked about Chick-fil-A. I was asking someone about Chick-fil-A, and like everyone knows that the customer service experience is going to be the same at every location,
Yeah.
and they're always going to say, "My pleasure." They all know they're trained to do that. And I'm like, what is going on at Chick-fil-A that we can't have in hospitals and medical communities? Whereas when you have a resident there or have a patient there, these are the things that you say. These are the things you don't say. And you're detailing that. And it's amazing how you're talking about crafting the story. Everything begins with a story. And then taking that story all the way down to like the actual employees or cast members that are playing a role in the bigger story. And I feel like a lot of times we have people in our companies or industries that they don't know that they're playing a role in the bigger story. They feel like they're just emptying trash or just signing people in and getting them registered. No, you're actually a cast member playing a role in this bigger story. Do you even know what that story is? So I love the fact that you took it all the way from an idea and a story, and you went from like the actual thing that we see to the actual employees or cast members that are there, and they're playing a role in completing that entire story. Because that's super, because you can have a beautiful facility and you can have terrible employees, and it's like, who cares? Like my experience is terrible at this beautiful place. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell anybody we're not going there, even though it looks really good. It doesn't represent the people that are actually there. So the fact that your company takes them through the external appearance and all the way down to what the employees are actually doing with the customers that come there, that is phenomenal. That is crazy. I didn't know y'all did that. That is
Yeah.
sweet.
And Chick-fil-A is a great example. What's interesting is that Dan Cathy, who's the chairman of Chick-fil-A, is now kind of taking those customer service principles and applying it to the movie industry, and actually has created a whole town to serve the creative industry down in Atlanta. So he has a studio in a town called Trillith, and Trillith has become the largest movie studio in the world, bigger than Warner Brothers. And it's where most of the, kind of new Disney and Marvel movies are shot. The recent new Superman movie that's coming out was shot there. The Rock was just down there shooting the live action Moana movie. And so what Dan has done is he's taken these Chick-fil-A principles of just serving people as we serve God and applied it to the movie business. And then he's built this connected town that serves the creative community. And in 2021, we got brought in to help them add a layer of story to that. And we're now master planning the next phases of that, which includes a live action soundstage complex with multiplex theater, where they'll have like Family Feud being filmed there, and you can be a part of the live studio audience there. And we're creating kind of a whole landscape architecture around that complex that connects it to the rest of the town. We're working on the next residential neighborhood, which is kind of fantasy storybook tree houses that you can live in. And we've designed the movie studio tour, and we operate that movie studio tour. But all of that was the vision of Dan Cathy, and he brought us in to help with that. But they're very intentional about their culture, not just the spaces, but the cultural interactions that happen.
Town? You mean like a town that people live in?
Yeah.
So, but okay, so who's living in this town? The people that work at the studio are living in the town, or just anybody that wants
It's
to live
open to
there?
anybody, but they have,
So I could buy a house in that town,
yeah, yeah,
and that's the same thing with the treehouse thing that's coming soon. I can just buy a treehouse in the town of tree houses.
yes,
That is amazing.
yeah,
How do you? I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but talking about the culture there at Chick-fil-A and even what you've done in the industries, how do you create that type of culture in the people that you're hiring? I know that that atmosphere is a big deal. So even like in the homeschool community, the community that we created, we want a certain atmosphere on the campus. So what do you do to create that type of atmosphere and that level of customer service, like across the board?
yeah. Well, I've had some interesting exposure to Chick-fil-A, through Dan and other ways. Actually, my son, Zach, is interning with the Chick-fil-A operations team in Raleigh, where he's going to school at NC State. And he's just been immersed in that culture. I mean, what an excellent place to get an internship. He actually actually went and got that internship himself. I'm like, I could have, I have some contacts there, but you went and did it, which is awesome. But anyway, and then actually my first exposure to the Chick-fil-A culture was my daughter Mallory, who's our middle child. Uh, what worked for Chick-fil-A in high school, and they opened up a new store right next to her school. And she went to the grand opening event and got to invite a guest, and she had me come with her, and they showed they showed these videos about their culture, and they had this one video that made you want to tear up because it was like people would walk in to the Chick-fil-A and maybe they had a bad attitude, but above their head would be what's going on in their life, like just came back from cancer treatment, or, you know, has a sick child at home, or, all these different scenarios that really made you think that I don't know what's going on with this person, but I'm just going to bless them. I don't care who they are. I'm just going to treat them well. And so that when they say my pleasure, that's coming from the heart. It's not just some rote phrase that they're instructed to say. They really do a lot of training to develop empathy for people. And then
Wow.
that Chick-fil-A is closed on Sunday is it's actually a hiring benefit because every person knows, well, I'm going to at least have one weekday off. So automatically, of all the fast food jobs out there, you're going to desire to go to Chick-fil-A first before any other place. So they've really created a outstanding culture that starts with, we're going to honor God and care about people. That's their whole mission and vision. And
Mm.
they're always learning too. Like last year, we took a group of the Chick-fil-A team from their learning and development group to Disneyland and walked them through Disneyland and did our whole kind of culture session with them. So they're never satisfied with where they are. They're always trying to improve and learn. And it's just embedded in their culture.
Wow. That is beautiful. There's something I want to transition to. I want to transition to like who you are as a person and your faith and how that has played a role in like your job transitions, even in your family, and what you do right now at Storyland. So speak to that a little bit. Well, before you speak to that, let's talk about this. You're a professional and you're busy and you have a family. What is family like? What is family like, and how do you balance being who you are in your career and who you need to be at home to your family?
Yeah, we're a big family. We have 5 kids, and you know what a big family's like.
Yes.
It's a lot to balance. You want to be able to give everybody the attention that they need. Our kids are grown up now. Zach, who's interning with Chick-fil-A, is going to be graduating later this year. And so he's our youngest. So it's reached a point where I've got less responsibility at home to care for little kids. And so that does make the work life balance easier. But that's always been a priority. And, you know, uh, I'm a Christian. And one of the things that we learn in our faith is that if we seek the kingdom of God first, then all these other things that you're worried about will be taken care of. And that verse is actually our family verse, that when my wife and I got married, that's what we're going to be about. And so haven't always been perfect, but that's been the focus. And so as busy as things got, I always made sure I was able to go to the kids' sporting events and the dance recitals and the, you know, parents' days at school and all that kind of stuff. We prioritized Lori staying home with the kids when they were young. She's in real estate now and doing great, but when we had the kids at home, we just knew that that was going to be our focus, to have her at home. That was a huge, tremendous help. There's no way that I could have done it without that. So just, yeah, prioritizing home first. And I saw that modeled when I was growing up. My mom and dad both worked, but they prioritized us first, and church and volunteering and all that kind of stuff. So I had a good example at home as well when I was growing up.
So you were raised in a Christian family?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Really, really great Christian parents. My parents helped start a church when I was like 8th grade going into 9th grade. So they were serious about their faith. And my dad actually finished his career at the Billy Graham Association, the last dozen years of his career before he retired.
Wow.
Kind of taking his secular skills that he learned in the telecommunications world. He worked for AT&T and and worked on the Billy Graham TV telephone ministry, which was basically when you see like a classic sermon running on TV, they have the 800 number on the screen. He managed the whole program behind that, all the technology and the volunteer call centers across the country for that. So, uh, he got to apply his real world school skills to a cause. And so I feel like I'm getting a little some of that in my career now with the Plain Joe side
Hmm.
of our company.
One thing that is extremely obvious when talking to you, I asked you about your faith and talk about your family life and all that stuff. The first thing you said was, "We're a big family." And you just gave the biggest smile ever when you talked about the fact that you're a big family. I believe that that speaks to the actual heart of like who you are. There's some people that they mention they're a big family and their face gets down because they're tired and they're exhausted and everything. But the example you set of, hey, we're a big family and I'm excited about it, that is that to me personally, as a dad with a big family, that is so beautiful to me. It's extremely beautiful. But another thing you said when you talked about the foundational scripture of your marriage and your family about seeking God first, I imagine what you were saying was, pretending I'm on the Imagineering team. I imagine that you're saying that's the story of your family. Your story of your family and your marriage and everything is seeking God first. So now that you have that story of seeking God first, then everything else just needs to fall in line with that story. Is that basically what you were saying?
Yeah, that is true. And that verse, if you look at the verses before it, it talks about basically worrying about the basic needs of life. And that's really easy to do because there's a lot of pressure and, having to provide for a big family. and I haven't always been perfect about the worry thing. I still will worry about stuff, trying to help run a business. We're responsible for a lot of people's families and jobs, and it's a heavy weight. But whenever I go there, I can always anchor back to that. No, God told me that if I seek after him first, he's going to take care of all these other basic needs that we have. So it's a good mental health verse to anchor to, because you realize it's not all on you.
And once again, begin this conversation, throughout this entire conversation, we've talked about team. And I remember one of the things that you said, because I wrote it down. I'm taking notes in this master class.
Okay, all right.
But you said something about, no matter how small the idea is, you need a team. You need someone else to help you with the idea. So just back to the worry and thinking about that scripture in your story, you know, Jesus is on our team. So regardless of what we're doing, providing, or we have a sick child or marriage problems or anything, all these mental health issues, Christ is there on our team. So that's why he's saying, I love that. I love it. Love it. Another thing that I want to talk to you about, I imagine that this is sort of off the record or whatever, but you've been a mentor not only to me, but to other men. And I imagine other couples, other family. I know you and your wife do marital counseling and stuff. And I figured this is something that you all just have a heart to do. But tell me, like, how did you all, or even you personally, get started with mentoring other couples or families or whatever you do?
Yeah, I think it just happened organically. I would just have younger people in my life either just directly say, "Hey, would you be willing to mentor me?" or just ask about certain things that were going on in their lives, and then they just periodically follow up and ask. And I don't know, but Lori and I both have a heart for younger people, and I think we're kind of young souls rather than old souls. And so we've got like friends that are our kids' age, and people are like, "Why? How did you end up hanging out with them?" And we're like, "I don't know. They're just fun. I guess they think we're fun. They want to hang out with us." But yeah, it just kind of happened organically. But I also remember just being there myself, and you know, not knowing what's going on and having mentors to help me along. And so it's always rewarding to be able to help others. When you can help others, it's so much more. There's research that shows that happiness comes from helping others. It's not about focusing on yourself, but if we can get outside of ourselves and focus on others, then that's when the happiness comes.
Wow. There's a concept, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times before, but it's a concept of being, then doing, then having. And a lot of times in this current generation, we want to have the great marriage or the great life or the great kids, but we haven't done the becoming part. And I believe with you, because I've talked to some of the other people that have a relationship with you, they see what you have as far as the big family, and you actually have a relationship with your kids, and you actually enjoy and love being with your wife and spending time with your wife. And they see like the end result, but they gravitate towards you because they want to be the type of person that loves God, that demonstrates a love for God, that demonstrates leadership in his family, that demonstrates the fact that he loves his wife. So I personally, I asked you that question first, but I feel like I already know the answer. They see a lot in you, so therefore they want to get close to you so that they can be the type of person that yields the results that you have yielded. Because like you're on the opposite side of where a lot of these young people are. So like, oh, I need to get connected to Matt so that when I'm where he is, I can at least get close to something that he has. And it goes back to the point of we're standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us. So it's like, I appreciate you for just being whoever you are in this space with all of your experience and you being available. Because I know, like, when me and my wife met you, like, y'all just seem like y'all are approachable and available. And not everyone, like, appears like that. I know some people may be, but you all actually appear as approachable and available. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about the Chick-fil-A culture and the empathy. It's like you and your wife know how to relate to people on so many different levels that it helps us to be in relationship with you all. So it's phenomenal to be in relationship with you all. I have to ask you a question because in the background there's a Thor hammer over there. That is what that is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, this is totally off topic and totally side note. Like you being in industry that you're in and you're telling stories, crafting stories and everything. You personally, like, what's your favorite story or your favorite movie or your favorite book? Like, what really, gets you excited about going to a movies or reading a book? Is it Marvel stuff or what type of guy are
I
you?
mean, I love the Marvel stuff. Obviously, as a Disney guy, I love all the Disney stuff. I love Star Wars. I grew up on Star Wars. I love the Marvel stuff. But my all time favorite kind of fictional story and movie is Lord of the Rings. Have you ever seen Lord of the Rings?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So I just love that epic story of good versus evil. And J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote it, was a Christian. And so he embedded some Christian allegory in there. It's not as obvious as kind of like the Narnia series, but it's in there. And I love that epic battle between good and evil. And the movies were just so well done. The Return of the King, the last movie, won Best Picture. So yeah, that's my favorite fictional story.
Yeah. Sweet. Cool. I just I never knew that about you. So I just wanted to know in your field, like, what are you really into?
But
So,
Thor's hammer is actually an air freshener. You know, those little
no, it's not.
scentsy things that you put like the candle wax in and it puts the scent out there. So I got some
Okay.
full coconut coming out of Thor's hammer right now.
That is wonderful. Okay. I never would have thought that, but okay.
The lightning that you see down there underneath the the hammer is just like
Uh-huh.
it's just a light that melts the candle.
That's cool.
You're actually the first person to have noticed Thor's hammer in the background, by the way.
Really? Oh, I've been watching the whole time.
I've had it for like a
I'm a
couple
fan of those
weeks
movies.
and nobody said anything.
I'm the first one. So tell me this. I want you to speak to the young people for a second. Well, young people and the parents that really know their kids. Like if someone would want to go into an industry like yours, and if someone feels like, oh, I'm creative, I like telling stories and everything, like at the high school level, what would be a good step or positioning thing or something to do in their free time? Because like a lot of kids in their free time, they're getting on TikTok or they're getting on YouTube or they're daydreaming about stuff. What's some way that parents can be more intentional about directing their kids in a direction and something that kids can do to be more intentional about, hey, I would like to go into a field like Matt's?
Yeah, I mean that it can be hard to get into because there's only so many of those jobs. But the beauty of it is that there are so many different disciplines within Imagineering and marketeering that there are a lot of ways in. So I think the first thing that a kid would want to do, a young person would want to do is figure out what you're good at and figure out what you love. Some people have come in as architects or interior designers or landscape architects or writers or just conceptual artists. Like they're really good at drawing and creating big ideas. You can be an engineer and get into it. Some people learn to design roller coasters or ride systems. There's master planning, thinking about the big picture of urban development, town planning, the big picture of the theme park layout. And then even broader, like if somebody just wants to work for the Walt Disney Company or Walt Disney World, I mean, Walt Disney World is the largest single location of any company in the US with about 60,000 employees there in the Orlando area. And there's literally fire department, police department, there's HR people, there's finance people, there's any restaurants, hospitality, all of it is there on that campus. So on a broader scale, if somebody's interested in working for Disney, they have about every role you can think of. But within Imagineering, it tends to be over 100 different disciplines. And if somebody's interested in learning more about the Imagineering process, there is a great documentary series on Disney Plus called The Imagineering Story, where they through
Hmm.
multiple episodes they walk through kind of the very beginning from the Disneyland birth of Disneyland through almost today and the many parks around the world, including Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, all of that. So that's really good. Walt Disney Imagineering has a really good YouTube channel that you can look up, and they have all kinds of episodes about the different aspects of what they do. That's another great way to learn about what the different roles are and how the process works.
Sweet. So let me ask you this. That's a wealth of information because I feel like in this day and age, if you want something, then you can just do a search online and you can find out some information to get you closer to what you want or the people that have the information that you want to learn about. So that's absolutely perfect. I'm gonna link all of those in this show, so that'll be perfect. The last thing I want to ask you is about the future. Where do you see the future of this whole storytelling industry going with, I mean, you can talk about AI, you can just talk about virtual reality or whatever, but where like in the next 5, 10, 20 years, what's going to be next for Storyland? What's going to be next for telling stories in general and theme parks? Take this wherever you want to take it, but what's next?
Yeah, there's a lot that's changing. I would first of all say that what won't change is anchoring to story and make sure that it's the story first, because Walt Disney said that it's not about the technology. The moment that people start looking at the technology, that means you've missed something. You want to use
Wow.
the technology only in service of telling the story. If people are thinking about your technology, then you've lost. I'll recommend another resource called Creativity Inc., which is a book. That book was written by Ed Catmull, who was the president of Pixar and became the president of Walt Disney uh, Animation. But before that, he worked for Lucasfilm, George Lucas's group that did Indiana
Hmm.
Jones and Star Wars, just a real innovator in the industry. But he pointed out that when Pixar came out with the first feature length animated, computer animated film, Toy Story, the reviews out there talked about the storytelling and the characters and how wonderful a movie it was. And oh, by the way, the animation's really great, but you got to meet Buzz and you got to meet Woody. So if it didn't have a great story, the whole industry of computer animation might not have progressed like it has, because people would have said, oh, people aren't ready for computer animation. But really, all the technology is just in service of telling the story. So, yes, we are using AI more. AI is a great tool for like getting a lot of menial tasks done. So, if we're creating a rendering of what an experience looks like, we can use AI to generate the trees, the crowds, the people, a lot of the elements. You're still going to have to create something original, but it can help you get there faster and easier. There are a lot of AI tools and animation. And then there's technology that helps make experiences more uh, seamless and more immersive. So if you get on some of the newer rides that are coming out, there's a blend of screens and practical set pieces in the foreground. And you don't even know where the screen starts and then stops. There's a lot of
Wow.
that happening. We're working with a company called Liminal Space that has a really advanced 3D LED technology that is super immersive, to where you just have to put on like these look like Wayfarer type glasses, and the 3D feels like it wraps around you. It's really immersive. So there's all kinds of cool stuff coming out that we'll take advantage of. But the minute we get all enamored with that technology and we forget to tell the story, people are going to be like, it's all right. I mean, think about the 3D movies. They thought that was going to be the biggest thing. And it's just like, some people will pay extra for the 3D, but it's really more about seeing the movie.
Right. So, were you the one that told me something about there's a park and like Spider-Man is like swinging through the park? Was that you?
Yes. Okay. So
What is that? What
that's an advancement in animatronic technology. So if you go to Disney's California Adventure, they have a land called the Marvel Campus. So it feels like you walk on to the headquarters of Marvel, and characters will start interacting around you. You'll see Black Panther come out next to his jet, and some villain comes on the scene, and he and Captain America are fighting him and all that.
But is it real people?
It's real people.
Okay.
And then you'll walk down this one street, and there's Spider-Man, and he's like, "Hey," he's interacting with you, and he's a real person. And then all of a sudden, some villain will appear up on the roof, and he's like, "I gotta go take care of this." And then so he runs up there, and you see him doing these kind of acrobatic things and running. And then there's one point where he gets to this span where it's just like, well, it's too far to jump. And all of a sudden he takes a leap and like flips through the air, does a tuck and touches his toes and lands on the other side. And you're like, what? How in the world did a human being just do that? Well, it's not a human being. It's a robot that's articulated in such a way that it's got all the joints of a person, and they were able to engineer it to where it does that free fly through the air that looks like it's actually Spider-Man doing all these acrobatic stunts. So
Wow.
pretty crazy.
Good. So in summary, it's like, yes, technology is going to get better and better, and we're going to use it, but always lead with the story and use the technology to amplify the story. Don't try to make the story about the technology. All right. Okay, sweet. And any final thoughts? I've enjoyed my time with you as always, in person and on this little virtual thing. But in any final thoughts for us as parents, for us as homeschool students that's coming up and about to enter into the workforce, any final thoughts that you want to give us?
Yeah, I think as parents, we want to be supportive of our kids. And so we can default into, you can be anything you want to be. Well, that's not true. I couldn't have been a gymnast. I'm just not built to be a gymnast. I probably wouldn't have made a great accountant. So it's not true that we can be whatever we want to be. We all have skills and things that we like and that are passionate about. It's got to be a combination of those things, like our skill sets. And you can develop a skill set, but it's got to be in an area that you're passionate about. So as a parent, I think it's our job to sort of call out when we see what our kid is good at and kind of guide them in that direction versus wanting them to be who we are.
Hmm.
That can be a temptation. I've got 5 kids, and 4 of them are daughters and one's a son. And when Zach decided he wanted to play football in 5th grade or whatever it was, I was excited because I played football too. And it was fun to watch him. But then when he was after his freshman year in high school and he did really well in football, he decided, I don't like this anymore. And I had to support him in that. And he ended up, so I was like, okay, you got to do something in the fall to keep your physical activity up. And at our little private Christian school, we basically had soccer, cross country, and I don't know, maybe there was one other option. So he was like, I'm going to run cross country. And I was like, okay, well, you're kind of a big kid, big, strong kid. It's not necessarily the body type I would see running cross country, but
Right.
that kid got out there and really got into it and got good. And he would do track in the spring and started doing distance and track. He went from a shot putter and discus thrower to a distance runner in track. By the time he was a senior, I mean, he went to state in both sports and was the leading runner on his cross country team and a really competitive cross country team. So he found out he was good at it, or at least he worked hard at it and enjoyed the process of going through it. Uh, yeah, we don't want to direct kids into what we did. We want to help them find their passions, and that that's I guess that would be my biggest advice.
We, yeah, and I know that as parents, especially with you with football, I mean, you had to let go of your excitement, your energy towards football and say, okay, I'll choke on that and find out what you want to do. Because it's crazy how, and I talked about talking to somebody about how we love all our children by treating them differently.
Yes.
because
Good.
God made all them different.
It's good.
So there's no way I can treat one of my kids like the other kid and call it love, because they're two totally different individuals. Where one of them might love basketball and the other one might love soccer. We just got to we got to lean into however God created them and understand that He's the author
That's right.
of their lives, not us, because we're just caring for them temporarily, but He's the true author.
Well, and what's fun is like all five of them have something that either in common or that we can talk about and enjoy. My eldest daughter is an artist and paints beautiful pictures. And then she's also working with a company that is doing some marketing and creative stuff. So we connect on that. My second daughter is a potter. She creates beautiful pottery. She's been commissioned to do it for restaurants and coffee shops and stuff. And I just marvel at her creativity. And then daughter number three is doing social media for a baby products brand. And so we can kind of talk shop over that stuff. And then daughter number four is in the fashion industry in New York City, but she's kind of in the marketing and branding world and does social media for a couple of brands. And so we can connect over that. And then my boy Zach is a business major working for Chick-fil-A, and we have fun kind of talking about that part of the business, which I've been involved in as well. So there's some kind of connectivity and something in common with each of the kids, but they've been able to blossom, do their thing, which is really fun to see them when they get to this stage.
Yeah. I'm I'm trying to stop talking to you, but you brought up something else I want to bring up. What are your thoughts on the fact that, like, when you name all your kids, it's like I'm sure they did a lot of stuff when they were younger, but at what point did they shift into, oh, I'm gonna focus on this thing and get really good at this, as opposed to, hey, I'm gonna do pottery and I'm gonna dance and I'm gonna cook and I'm gonna write stories. At what point did you sort of help them to focus in on one thing so they can be great at that one thing as opposed to mediocre in all little things? Or did that just happen organically, or is that something that you and Lloyd sort of encouraged them to do, to focus in on something?
Yeah, it really happened organically. And I feel like parents almost pressure their kids to specialize too early. You hear about these people are just like, all they do is baseball and travel baseball and it's baseball year round. And I just feel like it's better for kids to be more well-rounded. Our daughter Kaylee, who's the potter, was always very academically focused. Like she was almost a perfect student. Like she was valedictorian of her high school class. She graduated summa cum laude from Appalachian State in global studies. And I'm thinking, okay, she's going to be an ambassador, or, at one point I thought maybe she'd be a lawyer or an accountant. Like calculus was her favorite subject. So I'm like, what's Kaylee going to do? And when she graduated, she got into producing in the film industry, which is really good job for somebody that's very detail oriented and, good with numbers and financials to kind of keep all the creative filmmakers in line. And Kaylee was good at it, but she didn't like the chaos of it. It was very chaotic. Like when I've done a lot of film production and commercials and videos for marketing, and even in themed entertainment now, we do a lot, and it's it's chaotic. It's a lot. And she just found out she didn't enjoy that. And so she decided somewhere along the way that she wanted to do pottery and just started working on it more as a hobby. And then just got better and better at it and decided to make a business out of it, set up her Instagram. It's called Blank Ceramics. Her married name is Kaylee Blank.
Blank
Yeah.
ceramics.
And so you can find it
Okay.
on Instagram, but she does all kinds of art shows and art festivals. She sells it online. And then, like I said, she's been commissioned by restaurants and coffee shops to, do their pottery mugs and serving dishes and things like that. So she just got good at it so she always had a sort of a creative eye. She was really good at photography and excelled in art class in school as well. And I guess that combination of the precision that she has and the excellence and the artistic eye was perfect for being a master potter. So that's where she ended up. But I feel like if we had, I don't know, been really focused on, look, you're really good at math, you should probably be an accountant or CPA or whatever. I don't know if she would have gotten the joy out of that. She does enjoy
Wow.
doing her taxes though, which is really bizarre if you ask me. But
Okay, sweet. That's good. That's really good advice for all of us as parents out there. So, lastly, what about to the young people? What would you say to the young people that are they have these creative minds, they want to do marketing, want to tell stories, they're in high school. Like what should they be doing or what could they be doing right now to sort of feed and kindle that fire just a little bit?
yeah, I would say try a lot of things. You know, it's easier than ever to make things. There are open source software where if you want to try out animation or how to create people or create things in the computer realm, you can do that. There are tools for drawing. There are tools for filmmaking. So go out and make your own film and put it up on YouTube. Just try a lot of things. I mean, the themed entertainment world lives on a diversity of talent, and it takes a lot of disciplines to make things happen. Yeah, just try a lot of things.
Yeah, I was talking to some young people the other day, and I was because I saw some research that said that the majority of people that are on YouTube are just consumers. They're not. We think that everyone has a channel, everyone's creating, but on only a small segment of people are actually creating content from YouTube as compared to everybody that's using YouTube. And I like what you said about trying something. Not sitting around trying to study all the details and watching everyone else's stuff. Learn something and then implement it by being a creator and then seeing what happens. So I like that. I would like for our kids to switch from being so consumer driven and actually start to create something. So I like that. So Matt, thank you so much for spending this early morning with me. I always love talking to you. I think you have just a wealth of knowledge and even more than your knowledge, your character, and the fact that you love God and you demonstrate your love for God in everything you do. So I just appreciate you being with me and spending this time and really in being in my life. So blessings to you and your family and just
You're a
thank you
good
so much,
interviewer.
buddy.
I had no idea. Like, you should, I mean, this is perfect that you're doing this podcast. You're really good at it.
It's fun. I love talking to people, especially people like you. So it's cool.
Awesome.
All right, so we'll be in touch, man. I love you and love your family. Thank you so much once again. Matt Ferguson, y'all.
All right. So good to be here.
I had a great time. Did you have a good time? I'm pretty sure you did because everyone has a great time with that. So one thing that stood out is I love how he went into the story and leading with the story for connection and relationship. Love that. So that's the end. That's the end of the interview. I'm so glad you all stayed to the end. I have a newsletter down below for you to subscribe to. You can get in touch with Matt if you want to holler at him for anything that you might have going on that he can be of assistance with because he's that type of guy. So subscribe to the podcast and I will see you on the next interview. Be blessed.